Why isn't it letting me? Sorry, bear with me here. I'm trying to get to my page. If you can see and hear me, let me know in the chat if you don't mind. I'm just trying to confirm that for some reason the page has changed, so I don't. It's not letting me see it. If you're on here, I apologize. I'm just trying to get to my right page here. Oh. It's kind of acting slow on me. Come on. So just if you guys can see, I'm trying to confirm that I'm actually live right now. So if you guys are can see and hear me on the chat, let me know. So that way, let's see here. There we go. All right, so hopefully it'll work now. All right, thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Let me see. There we go. All right. Should be good to go now. All right. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure it was good to go. All right. So first of all, thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, you can post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen like a phone. If you're on a larger screen like a computer, it should be to the right of the video. So I also want to mention you can ask your question 24/7. You do not have to wait for the live office hours to ask a question or see the answer to your question. You can ask questions anytime 24/7 and it will be answered during the next live office hours. So we already had some questions that were in there. There's one question from Saturday. That's going to be the first question that's answered today. So yeah. So if you happen to, obviously it'd be great if you could join me live and see the live answer to your question. And I would definitely recommend that just in case you have some follow-up questions. But I know everybody's busy. Everybody's got stuff they got to do, or maybe going to play some golf or something. So if you're not able to attend the live office hours, all you have to do to see the answer to your question is to go to the office hours archive, and you can access that by selecting the green button that is below the video there. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started here. Last thing I wanted to mention is we will just be having office hours on Monday and Tuesday this week. I have a clinic on Wednesday and Thursday, and then I also am going to be out of town Friday. So just going to be Monday, Tuesday this week. So get all your questions in early. Then we'll be back normal schedule next week for the office hours. All right, so let's start here with Mark S. Says, if I am continually hitting behind the ball with my irons, why not just move the ball back in my stance address? Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Usually that's really a great idea. That's typically, when I have a student that is struggling with ball first contact, the very first thing that I look at is ball position. So yeah, if you have the ball position really far forward, it's going to be more difficult to make ball first contact because we have to understand the geometry of making ball first contact. And it's fairly easy if we have a good visual here. So if you imagine this hula hoop here, this is the arc of the club head coming down. So the club head comes down in an arc. It reaches a low point in the arc, and then it starts to work back up, right? So the bottom of that arc needs to be in front of the ball on the target side, and it needs to be a little bit below the ball. That's going to allow you to have a descending or downward blow on the golf ball, which is what we need to be able to make ball first contact. If you imagine, let's say that I'm hitting the ball this way, and my ball is where my hand is right here. The club is working down, and then it starts to work back up. So if that is the situation, then I can't really hit the ground because the ground's in the way, or I'm going to chunk it, right? And if I miss the ground, I'm more than likely going to hit it thin or blade it or top it, right? Or possibly miss it, right? So I need to have my ball position to be more like this, where this hand is where the ball is. The club is working down. It hits the ground and the ball roughly at the same time, but it continues to work down into the ground and starts to work back up. They've measured professional golfers, and they have found that the bottom of the swing arc is generally on average around 3 to 4 inches in front of the ball at contact. Now, this is for shots that are off the ground. Obviously for a driver, a tee shot, where the ball is elevated on a tee, there's space underneath the ball between the bottom of the ball and the ground for that club to miss the ground and work up into the ball. And ideally, you would do that with the driver. That's going to help you to get a higher launch, possibly a lower spin that can help you to hit the ball farther. It's not an absolute requirement to hit good drives, but if you want to launch it higher and hit a little bit farther, you can certainly hit up on the ball a little bit. So that's what we have to understand first with the geometry. So if you imagine if my ball position is way up here, it's going to be hard for me to get the bottom of the swing arc to be in front of the ball. So I like to see ball positions for shots that are off the ground, generally like a stock shot. So like you're just hitting like your typical 7-iron or something like that. I like to see that middle to maybe just a little bit forward of middle. I also don't have a problem with it being a little bit back of middle. Now, let's say that your ball position is already back of middle and you're chunking it. You can move it back more, but the more you move it back, some other things can come into play, right? So first, the more back the ball is in your stance, the harder it is. The face is going to tend to be more open, right? Because you're hitting it sooner in the arc. Remember, we had the hula hoop, with an arc. So basically, the earlier in the arc, the more open my face is going to be. The later in the arc, the more closed my face is going to be. So if I put the ball position way back here, it may be difficult for me to get the club face square at contact. I'm also going to tend to hit very much down into the ball and chop down to the ball. It might be hard to get some height on your shots if you don't have a lot of club head speed and things like that. So, the first thing that I would do typically is to look at the ball position, but we can't go too extreme with it. A lot of times, if the ball position is already back of the middle and we're still chunking it, it's likely a weight shift issue. So making sure that we get a good weight shift, we're getting our body forward. Because if you imagine, if I have the ball in the middle of my stance and I'm like this, imagine my club's going to be bottom out back here, right? So I need to get my body forward so that my club can bottom out more in front of the ball and I can hit more down through it. So yeah, I like the first thought being, hey, let's move the ball position back. Typically that is helpful, but we can't be too extreme with it. The other thing to consider as well is putting the ball back in the stance is no guarantee either. We're human, we're adaptable. So we don't know exactly how you're going to react to putting the ball back in the stance. So maybe you have the ball in the middle of your stance and you're chunking it, and then you put it back in your stance and you still chunk it, right? Well, that's just because you're adapting to where the ball is in your stance. If we were just robots, we just swung the exact same way every single time, no matter where the ball is placed or anything like that, then yeah, of course, moving the ball back a little bit would certainly take care of that. But we're human, we're adaptable, so that's not always going to be the case. So that's definitely the first thing that I would typically do. But if the ball's already kind of back in your stance, I would definitely look at making sure that you get a good weight shift. A good way to kind of feel that is to do just a little mini step drill. You can actually do this as a rehearsal as well. So basically the way it would work is I'm going to have my feet close together here, and I'm going to start throwing this club back. And as I throw it back, I'm going to step forward, and then I'm going to land on that lead foot. And then I'm going to start the downswing from there, come all the way around to a full finish where I'm going to try to feel like I'm finishing with all my weight on my lead foot. So my hips are centered on top of my lead foot. And I want to actually feel like my trail shoulder is in front of that as well, because I'm coming all the way around into that full finish. So do a step. You can do a step drill to kind of get you the feel of that. And then you can do a normal stance practice swing where, again, you're coming all the way around, you're getting that feel, and then you go to hit the ball. So that could be a good rehearsal that you do that doesn't take much time. And we're talking like 10 seconds of preparation. It doesn't add a ton of time to anything. So just to get a good feel for it. And if you already have a good feel for it, you may not need to do that, but that could be a great feel to help you to make sure that you're getting that good weight shift to the lead side. But I love the first thought of the ball position, because that's, my first thought typically as well. All right, let's keep going here. All right, so Greg T says, hi Q, I have been having pain in my left elbow and I'm sure it is from playing golf. What causes this and what can be done to stop this pain? Unfortunately, Greg, I'm not qualified to give you advice on this. This is something you're just going to have to talk to your doctor about. So unfortunately, there isn't really anything that I can do. Tendonitis is probably what it is. And tendonitis is just overuse, right? So, but it's possible there could be other things going on there, but it sounds like tendonitis. And my understanding of what tendonitis is that it's just overuse. So if you imagine if I stood here and waved at you for an hour straight, right? Well, my shoulder and my wrist and things are probably going to get really sore, and I could get some tendonitis from doing that. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm waving wrong or anything like that. It just means that I've just sat here and done something, over and over and over again. So, we're not intended to swing a golf club hundreds and hundreds of times a day. So sometimes you can overdo it and you can get pains and things like that. I took up pickleball, a couple years ago, and I started getting some elbow pain just because my wrist wasn't used to making those kinds of movements, and I was doing them a lot, and I ended up getting some pain. And really what I did, and this is just purely what I did, is I just took a break, right? I just took a break. I used some Tiger Balm, put that on there. And obviously that's just to kind of help you deal with the pain a little bit. It doesn't actually make it go away or anything. It doesn't fix the problem necessarily, but over time, my elbow got more strengthened through that range of motion and that movement that I was making, and I didn't really have any elbow pain anymore. One thing I would also make sure of is that your grips are plenty grippy. Part of what may be going on is you may be really putting a lot of force into the handle, and I mean you can even feel it. Like if I were to grip this club as hard as I possibly can, right? And you can kind of feel in your forearm around your elbow, like where, what's happening there. Well, if you're not wearing a glove, or maybe your glove is wore out, it's slick, your grips are slick or things like that, you're going to have to put more force in the handle to be able to hold on to it. And that can lead to those issues as well. So I'd make sure that your grips are updated. If they're not updated, maybe clean them. If a lot of times that, you can just get some like soap and water, like a dish soap, and just, clean them up, dry them out, and then they'll have some good grip to them again. Sometimes you don't even need to like change your grip. Sometimes they just need to be cleaned because they just have so much dirt, and they get kind of, smoothed out from doing that. So yeah, that's basically what I would look at. But as far as, knowing what you exactly what you need to do, that's definitely I would talk to a doctor, about that, because they're going to be more qualified in helping you, with that specific thing. All right, so Ron A says, hey Q, once or twice around, I lightly brush the ground behind the ball on the downswing with my driver. I'm usually only 1 or 2 degrees into out, so I know it's not caused by being too shallow. I hit up on the ball 5 or 6 degrees, so I'm wondering if I maybe have too much spine tilt. What other causes could it be? Well, I wouldn't even necessarily see that as a problem. if you're trying to hit up on the ball and your club is barely touching the grass. Now, if you're actually like hitting and it's that is a problem. But if you're just coming in and you're just brushing the blades of grass, I wouldn't even look at that as a problem, to be honest. Um, so, but let's say you're coming in and you're actually like chunking your driver shots. That's going to be from the right shoulder just dropping too much, right? So we don't want to just drop the right shoulder. And this is what a lot of people do to shallow out the club. So yeah, you're probably shallowing out the club, but you might be shallowing out the club by virtue of dropping the right shoulder. So what that would look like is maybe something like this, where I go up to the top and then I drop my right shoulder. So we don't want to shallow out the club by dropping the right shoulder. We want our shoulders to rotate on a pretty similar plane in the backswing and the downswing. So if you imagine if I put the club across my shoulders, right, and I turn my shoulders to the top, and then I essentially want this end of the club to replace that end of the club as I come through contact, right? So if I were to go up to the top and then drop my shoulder, well, look what happened. What would happen is if there's a laser coming out of the end of this club, I want that to trace a line that's parallel to the target. If I drop my shoulder, well, that's going to trace a line that's going to go to the right of my target. So really what we want to do for the most part is shallow out the club, mostly with our arms, some with our spine tilt. So there's a difference between having your body angled away and dropping your shoulders. So my body's angled away, right? I go up to the top, I'm like this, my shoulders are still rotating on that plane. But if I go up to the top and then I drop that shoulder, well, that's going to move this club a lot closer to the ground, and then you may end up actually chunking it. So what I would try to feel like is like almost like you're over the top with your shoulders, right? Almost the opposite of what you're doing, which would be I go up to the top and then I'm maybe like this, maybe feel like that with your shoulders, but you're actually shallowing out the club more with your arms, right? So for instance, that could be, now it doesn't have to be all of these things, but it may be a combination of these things, or some of these things, but not all of them. So one of them would be like bowing the lead wrist. Now, this would be one that I would say nobody has to do. But if you find it easy to do and you prefer using a weak grip, which is what would pair up with this kind of move. So think about like a John Rahm, Colin Morikawa. These would be golfers that have weak grips and bow their wrist, or basically all golfers that bow their wrist are going to be are going to have weaker grips typically. But you can see how if I do that, how that shallows out the club, right? Forearm rotation. All players need to do some amount of forearm rotation. So if you imagine if I have my elbows to my side like this, and you imagine I'm turning a doorknob to the right for a right-handed golfer, that is going to shallow out the club, right? So you can see that shallows out the club. All golfers need to do some amount of that. Now for my shoulder joint does a lot to shallow out the club. There's a lot of things going on there. So one of the things that's happening for my shoulder joint is lowering. So if you imagine if I have my arm like this and then I lower it, that shallows out the club. Everyone needs to do that. You can't leave your arms up and shallow out the club. So if you imagine if I go up to the top of the swing and I just start rotating, well, I'm going to come way over the top. So I have to have some arm lowering to be able to make that happen. That's a big one. I would say that's probably the number one thing that I see people struggle with as far as shallowing out the club is people tend to like to leave their arms up. So it's between that and the spine angle being leaning toward the target. But I would say I see more people that are leaving their arms up and rotating early, as opposed to letting those arms come down as they start. They're unwinding in the downswing. So we got to get those arms coming down. Actually, there's a great video. Bryson DeChambeau, he has his YouTube channel and stuff, and one of his videos popped up for me, and I saw it. And he talked about shallowing out the club, and one I thought was a really good thought was to feel like your hands go to your pocket, right? Because that's essentially arm lowering, right? And it's arm lowering that's back here, not out here. So I can lower my arms and go like that. I want my arms to kind of lower like this. So basically what we want to feel like is that our lead arm is kind of sliding our bicep right, is kind of sliding down our lead peg. That's kind of what we want to feel like as we're coming down. That's going to allow you to get the club shallowing and be able to get the body turning into the ball. So that's a big one. External rotation, the trail shoulder, right? So that's this. So that's happening in the backswing to get the club into a position. So you know, most players in the beginning are going to tend to kind of hold that position. So what I mean by that is I go up to the top, I'm externally rotated in my shoulder here, and I'm going to keep it externally rotated in the beginning, right? I'm not going to go like that right away. So that's kind of the external rotation paired with arm lowering, and then also some what's called adduction, where you are bringing your arm toward your chest, right? So this is adduction. So external rotation, which is losing the arm wrestling contest, lowering the arms, and then adduction, which is basically moving my arm toward my chest here. So if you imagine you see that machine where you're going like that, right? That's essentially what I'm talking about there. That's basically an adduction, shoulder adduction machine, essentially is what that is. But that's you put those things together, and that's what tucking the elbow is. That's what we're talking about when we say tuck the elbow. That's what it is. That's all it is. It's just that. So that's what moves your elbow closer to you, your arm closer to you, and allows that club to be in a much better position, coming down. So those would be the things that I'd be looking at to help you to shallow out the club, as opposed to dropping the right shoulder. A lot of times that's people's instinctual thing that they do. Like I'm sure you're not thinking about, oh, I got to drop my shoulder to shallow out the club. It's just something instinctually that you're likely doing, which can lead to that. But again, if your club is just coming down and it's just barely touching the ground, it's not actually going to be a problem. But if you're coming down and you're actually chunking it, hitting the ground, the ground's actually taking some of the energy out of the club, well, that's another story, right? And then that's when I would look at, okay, you're dropping your shoulder too quick. You probably want to feel like you're over the top with the shoulders. And then the arm stuff that I just talked about would be what you want to do to get the club to be working down on the proper plane and allow you not to, hit the ground behind the ball. But like I said, it's not always the case, with what's going on there. All righty. Keep the questions coming here. We got plenty of time. I'll be on here till 6 o'clock. Again, I just want to mention we will not have office. We're just doing Monday and Tuesday this week. No office hours on, what would it be? Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So yeah, keep the questions coming. Got plenty of time left here. So while you guys are coming up with questions, I can start building this here real quick. What is today? Today's the 28th. Man, it's almost already the end of May. Friday is May 2. Yeah, so I don't see any new questions in there. No worries. But yeah, if you got them, bring them on. If not, no big deal. All right, so we got a question here from Brandon C. Says, "What do I do if I'm in between clubs?" Yeah, so there's definitely levels to this. What I would say, there's basically two things you can do, or a few things you can do to take a little bit off or add a little bit more. The main thing is going to be the speed that you are providing to the ball at impact. So the amount of club head speed. So if you hit all things equal, if you hit a ball with more club head speed, the ball is going to go farther. And if you hit it with less club head speed, the ball is going to go shorter. So if I'm between clubs, what I like to do is I like to take the higher club. So let's say I'm between a 7 and 8 iron. I'm like perfectly halfway between them. If I'm in that situation, what I'll do is I'll take the 7 iron and I will choke up on it. So I'll choke up on it about an inch. For me, what I have found, and this is just purely through trial and error, just kind of seeing what's going on. You'll have to test this for yourself. But I have found if I choke up on the club an inch, meaning if I leave an inch between my hand and the butt end of the club there, like normally I'm gripping the club right there, right? And then I choke up on it an inch, about like that, then that's going to take about 10 yards off. It may be more or less for you. It's just something you have to test for yourself. But generally speaking, for me, it takes off 10. So that's how I take a little bit off. Now, there might be some situations where that may not be the best result. So I would use that. I'm going to use that to take a little bit off of a shot, or if I'm between clubs, I would use that method probably 80 to 90% of the time. If it's a stock shot situation, it doesn't matter the height of the shot. It doesn't. You're just trying to get the right distance, right? You don't have to hit it around anything. It doesn't have to be a specific height or anything like that. That's what I'm going to do. So let's say that it was a situation where I had to hit a high shot. So a situation like that might be if the pin's like in the front, right? And I want to land it on the green, I don't want the ball to roll out very much. So you might hit it higher to and maybe with a little bit more spin to basically get the ball to hit and stay, or possibly even spin back. So in that kind of situation, there's a couple things that you can do. So one thing that you can do is just give it a little extra, right? If you're comfortable with that, swinging with, a little bit more than what you normally would. Now, if you're normally always just kind of like swinging all out, it's probably not going to be the right thing for you. But if you're someone who generally, always has some left in the tank and basically just swings at the speed that they feel like they can do it consistently and not be kind of like overdoing it, then giving it a little bit extra will help the ball go higher, right? Because you're hitting it with more speed. Because if you hit the ball with the same launch and you hit it with more speed, the ball will climb up in the air higher, and the ball will also go farther as well. So that's one thing that you can do. You can also take the higher club. So you can take the lower club and give it a little extra to hit it higher, or you can take the 7 iron, right? So let's say again I'm between 7 and 8 iron, but I still need to hit it high. A couple things that I can do there. So one, I can maybe fade it, right? Try to hit a fade in there. In that situation, basically what I would do is I would just open the face to my path a little bit. When you open the face, the ball is going to go higher because it's adding loft. It's also going to add a little bit more spin, so it will go higher. Because again, when you open the face, it adds loft. More loft adds more spin. So you can take a 7 iron and hit a fade, and it can take some off of it, but it will go higher than normal, and you'll get a little bit more spin. You can also release it a little bit sooner, right? So if normally I come in, and let's say my normal impact position is like this, well, I could come in and release it a little bit sooner and have my impact position be more like this, where I don't have as much shaft lean, and I'll still have some shaft lean, but I won't have as much shaft lean, and that will deliver more loft, and that will make the ball go higher and with more spin. And again, the ball won't typically go as far unless all things equal, it won't go as far unless I, for some reason, add more speed to it. So that's a way that you can do it if you need to hit it higher. Obviously, if you need to hit a fade, you can do that. If the fade really kind of fits what you're doing. So let's say a situation where I would do that as a fade is if the ball was on the right hand side, for a right handed golfer. So what I would do in that situation is I would kind of aim it at the middle of the green, and then let the ball kind of fade toward the target, and it would take a little bit off of it, it would go higher, and hopefully it would land and hit soft, right? Another thing that I can do, let's say that I need to hit it lower, right? Well, what I can do is I could take the longer club. I can even go up to a 6-iron and choke up on it even more, and take a little bit more off of a 6-iron to get it to go 8-iron distance, and that ball would definitely go lower. A situation where I might do that is if maybe I'm hitting into the wind. If I'm hitting into the wind, I want to keep it low and with less spin. And the way that you could do that is with less loft. So I can take a 6-iron and do that. It was several years back, the Players Championship, when they had like some crazy weather. It was super windy, and I saw a lot of those guys go in there and hit these lofted clubs into the wind. They didn't have any control of, because the wind, it was like 30-mile-an-hour winds. It was like crazy winds. Imagine trying to hit that island green, with those winds. But it wasn't until Justin Thomas came up, and I believe he hit a 6-iron. I believe he choked up and hit like a 6-iron. And because the wind's coming at you, when the wind's in your face, it will add spin. So, with a 6-iron, you're going to still have plenty of spin to get that ball to kind of stick on the green, especially if you're hitting into the wind. And he just hit it right in the middle of the green. And that's, I think, if everyone would have taken that strategy, they would have done that. Or if everyone would have taken that strategy, there would have been more people to hit that green. So, but I just saw a lot of people hit 9-irons and just, hit a balloon ball and have no control of it, and so on and so forth. So now that's easier said than done. You might be thinking, well, how do I know how far it's going to go? Again, it's trial and error. These are things you have to practice. You don't know. Like I figured out that choking up takes about 10 yards off. Generally, if I hit a solid fade, if it's a slight fade, it will typically go about 5 yards shorter than my normal. You can also kind of hook it a little bit in there, and it will add a little bit, because when you hook it, you're de-lofting it, and you're closing the face, which means you're going to de-loft it, which means you're going to transfer more energy to the golf ball. There's going to be less spin. So, if you got a pin in the back, what you can do is you can kind of hit a hook in there, land it in the middle of the green, and it may kind of release out to the back of the green. So again, these are things that you have to practice, but there are plenty of ways to take a little bit off, add a little bit, and so on and so forth. Some of it you can do with opening and closing the face, which adds and reduces loft. Some of it can be in your release, right? So releasing it earlier adds loft, which makes the ball go higher and not as far. You can put it back in your stance a little bit and try to get a little bit more shaft lean, right? And maybe hit the ball a little bit farther. Generally, I prefer to just take a lower lofted club and take a swing that's more comfortable for me to take, and I'm going to get the same result, anyway. But it requires practice to understand, like, okay, if I have a 6-iron, or let's say I have a shot that I'm between an 8 and a 7-iron, I have a big wind in my face. Well, I can take my 6-iron and I can choke up on it a little bit and kind of get the distance that I'm looking for. It might end up even being like a 3/4 swing. So it's a skill to learn and understand your game, and to know, okay, if I do this, the ball's going to go this far, if I execute it, and so on and so forth. It's also a skill to understand, like, how much is the wind going to take off, and all that kind of stuff. But that's just stuff that you're going to learn through experience and through practice and things like that. But what I can tell you, generally speaking, if you are between clubs, and this will cover 80 to 90% of any shot that you have, if you are between clubs, what I recommend doing is taking the longer club and then choking up on it like an inch, and you will typically be right in between those clubs. Now, some people might be better at taking a little off, right? So instead of taking off speed by choking up on the club, right, and making the same swing, the same speed of swing, the same tempo, or what feels like the same speed of swing, but it's going to take off speed because you're choking up on it, what you can do is you can basically manually take off the speed. Now, for me, I'm not good at that. I can't, swing one at 90 miles an hour and say, hey, I want to take a little bit off of it and swing the next one at 85 miles an hour. I'm sure if you practice that, you can maybe get good at that. But for me, it's just a lot easier. It's like, I'm just going to stick with that swing to me that feels like a 90-mile-an-hour swing, but then I'm just going to choke up on it, and that's going to make it 85 miles an hour. So it feels the same to me, but because I've choked up on it a little bit, it's taken that speed off, and then I'm going to get what I want out of that. But you can test and figure out what works better for you. Feeling like you're hitting a 90% speed shot versus taking your normal speed shot and just taking a little bit off of it. But like I said, there's lots of ways you can take some off and add a little bit more on. All right, let's keep going here. If you got your questions, keep them coming. We got about 20 minutes or so left here. If anybody has any questions about any of the training aids or anything, the X1 wedge, the blue brick, the divot board, swing plate, anything like that, I'll be happy to talk about them. Anybody have trouble with a slice, I'll be happy to talk about that if you're having trouble with that. Short answer is, if you're having trouble with a slice, go work through that 20-minute shallowing fix. That's a great course for anybody struggling with a slice, for sure. Any questions about any of the courses, like the 20-minute shallowing fix? Any questions about the Top Speed Golf system? The 20-minute distance fix, if you're looking for to gain some club head speed. Any questions like that? Any questions about the online lessons, how they work? What you need to do, that sort of thing. I'll be happy to answer anything like that if anybody has questions about that. But yeah, so keep the questions coming. Like I said, we got about 20 minutes or so left here. Let me refresh this, make sure we got the latest and greatest questions in there. All right, yeah, looks like we're good. I thought this was interesting. Greg T, who asked a question earlier, he asked about, he said he had a ping putter, and asked about if he should have, more of an arc to his putting stroke, because, Ping does this thing where they recommend putters based on how much arc you have in the stroke. But what I wanted to be clear with Greg's question is that everyone has arc in their stroke. The putter does not go straight back and straight through, although that may be what it feels like. It's not literally, what's happening. The putter, is going to come back to the inside a little bit, then it's going to go out to the ball, then work back to the inside. So it's on an arc. Typically, the farther you stand away from the ball in your putting stroke, the more of an arc you're going to create. And the closer you stand to the ball, the less arc you're going to create. The only way you would really be able to putt with no arc would be basically to have a putter, which would be an illegal putter, but to have a putter that would have no lie angle, or a 90-degree lie angle. So you can see how there's an angle. So if I have this putter flat, right? Let's say that the sole of this putter is flat to the ground. You can see that an angle is being created right here between the shaft and the ground. That's the lie angle of the putter. So because this putter is being swung on an inclined plane, it has to have some arc to it. So you can imagine, again, if I'm farther away from it, you can see how that's going to arc more. If I'm closer to it, right? Closer to it, you can see how it's going to arc a little bit less. So also, the thing with ping putters as well, or really any putter, it's really, the reason why, generally if you have a putter that's being suggested for a bigger arc, right? So more of an arcing stroke. That means they have a little bit more weight on the toe side of the putter, right? So you can see here, if I balance this, you can see how the toe hangs just slightly. So this putter here is going to be generally a little bit better for a more slightly arcing stroke. So generally people that probably stand a little bit closer to it. Now, the reason for that is that when you stand farther away from it and you have more of an arc to your stroke, the toe kind of helps the putter like get through there instead of kind of like leaving the face open, because you may tend to like fan putts if you have more of an arcing stroke and you don't have that weight out there. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't ever. So let's say you have a big arcing stroke. Let's say you stand farther away from it. That's not to say that you can't use one of these putters and putt great with it. You certainly can. And it might be possible that you even putt better with that. It's just generally speaking, if you have more of an arcing stroke, you're going to tend to want to have more weight out on the toe to kind of help that toe kind of release and keep that face nice and straight through or nice and square through the putting zone. Otherwise, it may tend to get a little bit open. So that's really the only thing that's going on there. The other way that you could have a straight back and straight through putting stroke is if you basically use the highest lie angle that you possibly can. So basically the most upright lie angle that you can. And then you would actually have the putter kind of toe down. And then from there, right, and basically Bryson kind of tried to do that with the side settle putting. So basically I can putt like that, but nobody really, does that. I mean, that's possible that you can do that. The other way would be you be completely manipulating it. So basically you would have to push the putter out away from you, then toward you, then out away from you again to create a straight back and straight through. So it wouldn't be a very natural stroke. Now, if that's something you do naturally, then great. But I just haven't seen anybody do that, naturally. Naturally speaking, generally what's going to happen is if we put our hands together like this and I make a stroke, right, then that's going to create an arc in my stroke. And that's where most people are going to be the most natural. So now as far as knowing, okay, well, should I, if I stand this, how do I know how far I need to stand away from it? So that's going to come from where you see the line. What you see is straight. Not everyone's going to see the same thing as straight. So the way that you check this is by using a putting mirror. Very, very simple tool. I recommend pretty much anybody use something like this. So basically what this does, what I would do first to kind of test this is I would try to find a dead straight putt as straight as you possibly can, around 10 feet. And what you're going to do is you're going to place this down. And then what I want you to do is get your putter and kind of move it around and move your putter around with this on the face. And then see where, like, once I get there, like, okay, I want to stop once I feel like this is lined up straight with the hole. Now, once I feel like it's lined up straight, I'm going to get behind it and I'm going to see, okay, is this putting mirror now lined up perfectly straight with that hole? Now, if it's not, then that means that you're not actually seeing straight, and you probably need to stand closer or farther away from it to get your eyes to see straight. Now, if it is, then where your eyes are at over the ball is perfectly fine where you're at. And I would actually kind of get and see where your eyes are at. And what I like to do is take a Sharpie and just put 2 dots on here on each eye for where your eyes should be. And then when you go to practice, then you just get those eyes on your dot and you keep reinforcing that. So that way, okay, this is where my eyes need to be. This is how far I need to stand away from the ball to achieve that. And then okay, this is how far I stand away from the ball. And you might realize, okay, I may want a more, this would be considered more of a face balanced putter. It's a slight toe hang putter. So if you stand pretty close to the ball, so let's say your eyes are directly over the top of the ball, that typically means that you're going to be standing pretty close to it. And you're probably going to want more of a face balanced kind of putter, generally speaking. Now, let's say that your eyes are very much inside of the ball, and that's where you see the straightest. Well, then you probably are going to want more of a little bit more of a toe hang putter. Let me see. I actually have a ping answer right here. Let's see if how much of a toe hang this one has. So if I hold this I'm going to hold it like that, and I'm just going to let it go. So you can see how that toe is hanging a little bit more. right? So this is going to be considered more of an arcing stroke. So you're going to be better off like being a little bit farther away from it, to get this to work quite as well. But that's why I do definitely recommend getting a putter fitting, because it's going to help you to kind of figure out, what kind of putter, what kind of weighting and everything you need to have. I personally stand a little bit farther away from the ball, so I prefer a little bit more of a toe hang in the putter. That helps me to get through it a little bit better, release the putter head, and be in a little bit of a better spot. So that's how you would change it. Now, let's say this isn't, you found that this is not lined up, right? Well, then what I would do is I would then get it lined up and then get your eyes over it to find, okay, where does it look like it's straight? It's lined up straight. And then that's where you're going to find where your eyes should be over the ball to see where straight is. So then I would keep practicing that to get better at that and more comfortable with it. So that way, okay, this is where I need to be. You keep practicing it to re-ingrain it, to make it to where it's second nature. You don't have to think about it much. You just always have your eyes in the right spot. So definitely recommend a putting mirror. If you go to the, I believe it's actually this specific one. I've had this one for years, but this specific one, if you go to the resources page, so at the top of the screen, you're going to see a little tab there that says resources. If you select that, that'll bring you to the page with all the stuff that we recommend, training aids and stuff like that. And you should find a link to the putting mirror there if you want to pick one up. I definitely recommend everyone, kind of have one because it's important to because that's one of the major things with putting is the line, seeing the right line, hitting it on the right line, right? So if you're not seeing the correct line, you're probably not going to be hitting it on the right line. So you want to make sure that you're seeing the right line, and then from there you see if you're hitting it on the line that you're seeing. There's some people that are actually aiming left and then push their putts. And if that is something that you're doing and it's canceling out to a perfectly, you're hitting it on the line that you're intending, then that's totally fine. But if you're kind of setting up left all the time, you're missing a lot of putts to the left. Well, you want to get your eyes in a spot where you actually see straight, so that way you can hit it on the line that you're intending. So going through what I just talked about there would be, what I would recommend doing. All right, we got about 10 minutes or so left here. If we got any more questions, if not, no big deal at all.